And I'm Keon.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast that's not about Doctor Who. What?
Yeah. An episode of Doctor Who without the Doctor? What?
Yep. Or Stephen or Vicky.
Yeah.
And I think it's the only episode ever to not have the Doctor or his companions. Yep. The only Doctor Who story to feature neither the Doctor nor his companions.
Which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder what the viewership was for this. Because basically Mission to the Unknown is a setup for a super long
12 episode
storyline. It's weird. But yeah, let's check out the viewership for this actually.
Okay, I'll look it up.
But yes.
So this is the final what was it? The final thing that Verity Lambert was producer for.
Oh, yeah.
8.3 million viewers. Let's compare that to Galaxy 4, just while we're at it. Galaxy 4...
generally in the 9s with
11.3. So we got a 9, 9.5, 11.3, 9.9. So Mission to the Unknown, less, which is understandable considering there's no Doctor. So
right. But yeah, even without the Doctor and his companions, I still found this to be a pretty interesting episode, just because of what was set up here.
Yeah, the implications behind what's going to happen after this episode are pretty big.
Right. So why don't we just jump right into it then, as we always do?
We always start with jump right in.
Yes.
New catchphrase.
We don't really jump right in, though. We kind of talk about
we always get off topic before we start somehow. Okay, so it's on the planet Campbell.
It was. This was a reconstruction, by the way.
A lot of these things are reconstructions. Yeah, yes. It wasn't mentioned what planet it was, I think. It might have been, maybe we just couldn't hear it.
Right. Apparently set in 399 or 4000.
Yeah, I knew that. Because
there was the interesting little thing that they said. Basically, it starts where right where the previous episode left off, which was the guy in the jungle on the planet Kemble saying that he remembers he has to kill. Mm-hmm. Then you see a UN rocket.
Yes, UN Deep Space Force Group 1.
Right. And there's 2 crew members there trying to fix it because it's not working. Mm-hmm. Just as a lot of spaceships and the TARDIS never do in this show. So one of the guys is voicing his discontent with how they had to land there, and the other guy is just like, shut up and fix the ship.
Basically. So the kill guy shows up with a gun that Keon thought was a lightsaber.
It looked like a lightsaber. Well, it looked like the hilt of a lightsaber.
Let's consider this was made a good 20... No,
it was before Star Wars.
12 years before Star Wars. Star Wars was 77?
Yeah, 77.
So it was 12 years before then?
Yeah. It was the inspiration for Obi-Wan's lightsaber. No, probably
They watched this one episode of Doctor Who.
Just like the last scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, I feel, is the inspiration for the entire premise of Warehouse 13.
Maybe.
It could be. But anyway, it's way off topic.
That's a different discussion.
Should do a Warehouse 13 podcast. Anyway. So the dude sneaks up on the other dudes. Very specific.
Well, we didn't get their names till after one of them died.
Right. So he sneaks up on them and
he tries to kill one of them, but the one guy who's working on the spaceship is quicker and shoots him. And then we find out he just killed the guy named Garvey.
Right. Because his other companion was like, "What? You just killed Garvey!" And he was like, "Can't be undone now."
And so their names are Lowry and Corey.
Right, Corey is the one who killed Garvey,
and
then Lowry's the other guy. So Lowry is pretty upset because he'd known Garvey for a long time, but they both go back into the ship.
And then it zooms in on Garvey's hand.
You see him move. And
then
he has a weird thorn sticking
from the death counts.
Yes. But then...
we added him back later.
Yeah. So back in the ship, Corey reveals that he's actually part of a secret service type of organization. And I think this is where they were... So he reveals that he landed on the planet purposely because his organization had been tracking the Daleks, which he thought were supposed to be trying to form some sort of alliance and stuff. I don't know.
Well, a fighter ship in the solar system, and the wiki mentions that by the solar system they probably mean the Milky Way galaxy, because of what they're talking about. The episode spans way more than just our solar system.
Yeah.
But a fighter ship in the Milky Way galaxy has detected a ship that they've never seen in the Milky Way galaxy before, and apparently the description matches a Dalek ship. And so...
A description from 1,000 years ago, when the Daleks invaded Earth, so that's
what they mentioned.
Yes. So this is set 1,000 years after the Dalek invasion of Earth.
Which means that the Dalek invasion of Earth happened after the Daleks.
Yeah. No.
Yes. Because it wasn't the Daleks was only set like 50 years after the Dalek invasion of Earth.
I thought it was just an unconfirmed amount of time afterwards, but before, maybe it was after this too.
But in the Daleks, they're only on Skaro, and they have never left the planet. So that the Daleks must have happened at least before Mission to the Unknown. Because Mission to the Unknown is 1,000 years after they invaded Earth.
Well, in Dalek Invasion of Earth, they don't need the radiation to survive.
Right. And
so the Daleks must have come in between.
The Daleks evolved from the radiation on Skaro, and they needed that to survive for whatever reason. Right?
Yeah, but then the Doctor kills all of them.
Right.
Which creates a major plot hole.
I think everyone's wrong, and the Daleks happened before the Dalek invasion of Earth. The Doctor thinks the Dalek invasion of Earth happens before the Daleks, but I disagree. I think
it was just one Dalek rebuilt the entire race or something, or restarted.
Something like that.
I guess that could make sense.
Or there were Daleks who left Skaro in search of other things, and then they kind of rebuilt the whole race. I don't know.
But remember, in the Daleks, they couldn't leave the city because they needed the radiation, which makes everything not make sense because of that one.
Maybe the Doctor didn't kill all the Daleks on Skaro.
That's why I would think that this would come in between the Dalek invasion of Earth. Well, no.
The Dalek invasion of Earth would have had to happen after the Daleks then, because in the Dalek invasion of Earth, they didn't need the radiation to survive.
But in the Daleks, they had never left Skaro. Oh, God.
Okay, here we go. This is my theory. The Daleks. The Doctor didn't kill all the Daleks off. They were... All the Daleks were on Skaro.
Right.
But the Doctor didn't kill them off.
Right, but he thought he did.
He thought he did. Then they kind of evolved...
To not need the... They evolved to need the radiation, and they evolved not to need the radiation anymore.
Yeah, because the radiation never would have gone down. Because the Doctor destroyed all their bombs.
Okay.
So they would never have been able to use it. So
okay.
It has to be that way because the Thals on Skaro survive, right?
Yeah.
Except in the reboot, they're dead. They don't exist. So the Daleks must have survived, killed off the Thals, evolved not to need radiation, invaded Earth, and then 1,000 years later, this happens.
Okay, then the Daleks must have happened like 1,000,000 years before the Dalek invasion of Earth.
It's a time machine. It's entirely possible.
Okay.
I mean, the Daleks, the Skaro is in another galaxy.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
But on the other hand, the Daleks in the Dalek invasion of Earth hadn't heard of the Doctor. And then what about the chase?
Maybe they just forgot. I don't know.
They have time travel technology. We're forgetting about the chase.
The chase must be Daleks far in the future using their time machine to go back to the past.
Yeah, maybe the Daleks happens after Dalek invasion of Earth, and the Daleks who invade Earth and that are just from the future.
Maybe the Daleks just happens, like, way, way, way in the future, even after the chase.
Maybe.
But then it wouldn't make sense with the reboot when the Thals are dead.
I don't know if the Thals are dead, but I do know Skaro is a wasteland that no one goes to anymore.
Maybe that version of Skaro is way after the Daleks.
Oh, no.
Whatever. All that's confirmed is that this takes place 1,000 years after the Dalek invasion of Earth. It's way too confusing to try and figure it out.
Continuity.
Is there an official timeline or something?
For the Daleks?
There must be. There has to be.
I'll look it up. You keep explaining the episode.
Where did we leave off?
1,000 years afterwards.
Right, so Corey landed the ship there purposefully to see what the Daleks were up to, because the way they knew the Daleks were on that planet was because they were using a sort of, I guess it was a biological weapon, you could say, the Varga, which were... What?
This makes it worse.
Let's just not even read it. We could for the comedic effect.
There's a serial called The Genesis of the Daleks. I don't know what it's about, but it says the Daleks before that and the Daleks after that take place in different continuities.
Well, I think
time travel mumbo jumbo. I don't know.
I think we can just conclude all this by saying the writers had absolutely no idea what they were doing with the Daleks.
Yes.
And they just tried to put them in as many serials as possible.
By that you mean Terry Nation, right? Because I think he wrote every Dalek serial.
Yes.
So far, for us at least.
Yes.
Okay.
But whatever. It's time-space travel. Yes, the Vargas are a plant-animal hybrid thing that the Daleks created on Skaro, and basically they would sting you with their needles or whatever.
The poison would make you want to kill people,
and eventually turn you into a Varga yourself.
Right. Honestly, I'd be more scared of the Vargas than the Daleks.
The Vargas are super slow-moving, though.
But if you shoot them, they just regrow. You can't kill them.
Okay. True. But I feel like they never show up again after this.
Probably.
So, the only possible explanation for the Varga being on Kemble would be if the Daleks were there, too. So, they're gonna go explore, I guess.
No, they're gonna
send their distress signal. But they're also gonna try and track down...
And then it cuts to the Daleks.
Actually, no, they decided not to track down the Daleks.
They decided just to send a...
Yeah. But they go outside... it cuts to the Daleks first.
Yeah, it cuts to the Daleks. And the Daleks are talking to a bunch of other aliens. And it looked like there was a Sensorite in the background, but it wasn't. And they were talking about some sort of outer galaxies plus Daleks alliance.
Yes, an alliance of 7 different species that was gonna...
Now that I think about it, I think then the Daleks mentioned that they're from this solar system, which means Skaro would be in the Milky Way galaxy. But that doesn't make sense, because the Dalek ship's never been sighted in the solar system before.
God.
There's discontinuities within this episode.
Did they mention that they were from the solar system or from the galaxy?
Well, it was the 6 outer galaxies.
Yeah, the 6 outer galaxies.
And then plus the Daleks. The solar system. I'm sure they said the Daleks of the solar system.
Yeah.
The Milky Way galaxy! There's discontinuities within this episode.
Or we're just interpreting something wrong. Or it's going to be explained later.
Maybe we misheard something.
But, to be honest, I'm just gonna go with it. There's nothing else. There's no other way around it.
I feel like they decided the TARDIS was going to be traveling through time, and at the same board meeting, they're like, guys, let's just not care if the time travel doesn't make sense. And everyone was okay with it.
Yep.
So, the six outer galaxies and the Daleks are making some sort of super PAC. Yeah, to fund a government campaign. No, super PAC. And the delegates want to know if the people have been killed. The Daleks are like, oh, we'll hunt them down. So, like, are you sure? And then it cuts back to the people. Corey and Lowry.
And they go outside their spaceship to send their distress signal. And they see that Garvey has been turned into a Varga.
Right.
But the Varga are really, really, really slow moving. and Corey and Lowry just leave.
Yeah, they just kind of walk away and like, yep,
So
we're out.
we decided to add Garvey to the death count because we thought that he had died before being turned into a Varga. Mm-hmm. So he is now on the death count. So the Daleks deploy some Daleks to go hunt down Corey and Lowry.
And, Lowry gets cut by a Varga plant. And he pulls a Barbara and decides not to tell Corey.
Smart move.
We all know how well that worked out for Barbara.
And it works well. Yeah, pretty well, but it works out way less well for Lowry, who eventually starts wanting to kill Corey, and then Corey just kills him.
Yeah, Corey's like, nope, you're not going to kill me.
Yep.
And then the Daleks show up and kill Corey. Well, Corey records a message.
He records the distress signal, but doesn't send it, and then the Daleks kill him. Mm-hmm. And then the camera zooms in on the giant tape recorder he was using to record the distress signal with. So that's probably going to be a major thing later on.
Yeah. And that's the end of the serial, really.
Basically it.
They accept the pact, and then they say, we're going to invade Earth first.
And then the Dalek Supreme wipes the miniature Earth off the map of the solar system dramatically.
And the episode ends.
Yeah, that was really it. Short, but I liked it, and I liked what it promises for the rest of the season, or the next couple of serials.
So I just read something interesting on the wiki that this episode was written by Terry Nation partially as an attempt to create a spin-off series featuring the Space Security Service that Corey was a part of, as well as the Daleks.
That obviously didn't play out.
Yeah, that failed. It was also produced because they turned Planet of the Giants from 4 episodes into 3.
Oh.
And they needed an extra episode to fill the...
Huh. I don't know. I wouldn't be... I don't think a show featuring the security police would be too interesting. I mean,
we basically got that in the reboot with Torchwood, sort of.
Sort of. Have you watched Torchwood?
One episode, the first episode.
Is it ongoing? I mean, is it still?
It's done now. Mm-hmm. They did 2 seasons. They kind of did a 3rd season, and then the 4th one was made in America, and it was kind of done after that.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean,
1 episode serial, shortest serial so far, and basically just a setup for what's to come. And as we all know, the Doctor and his companions are going to get mixed up in this.
Yep. This episode was recorded and produced with Galaxy 4 in season 2 production block.
Huh.
So it was also made by the same team, so they basically just considered a 5th part of Galaxy 4, even though it formed its own serial, really. And that's that. Verity Lambert is now out.
Funny note, the Doctor, or William Hartnell, was still mentioned in the credits, even though he didn't appear in the episode at all.
It's because his contract required him to be mentioned in every episode. That's that.
Yes.
So, the Daleks Master Plan.
So,
Vicky got written out in between Mission to the Unknown and Daleks Master Plan, and now we have Katarina.
Yep.
So,
continuing on from Mission to the Unknown, which was that 1 episode serial 2 serials ago,
we went on a long tangent about the Dalek timeline,
which we hopefully won't get into this time, because it's very confusing and melts brains everywhere. And just why? It doesn't make sense.
So the serial picks up from the end of The Mythmakers with Stephen dying in the TARDIS and Katarina being
ancient Trojan.
And not understanding what's happening, of course.
Yes, she thinks she's going off to heaven with Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
But she's wrong. She's actually going into
space.
Space, yes.
So the TARDIS lands on the planet Kemble,
which is where Corey, Garvey, and what's-his-face all died earlier.
Right.
which at this point I was like, wait, this is kind of weird, because at the end of Galaxy 4, Vicky looked out of the TARDIS and she's like, I wonder what's happening on that planet, signifying Kemble. So obviously the TARDIS was above Kemble, and then they went to ancient Greece. But now they're back on Kemble, which I thought was kind of weird. I mean, it makes sense, but I just thought it was kind of weird that they'd be there, they'd go to ancient Greece, and then they'd just come back.
Well, they came back later than they left.
Yeah, they came back later than they left, but yeah. Not much later.
Well, later enough that the Space Security Service or whatever had sent more ships to investigate the Koi missing crew of that ship.
Which is actually where this serial starts. So, yeah.
Brett and Kurt are in the forest.
And they've been trying to look for signs of the previous expedition, but Kurt is injured, and he's telling Brett to go on without him as they make their way through the jungle. And first, Brett is reluctant to do so, but eventually he decides it's for the best, and he does.
And then Kurt dies. The Daleks show up and eliminate him.
Yep.
They exterminate him.
Literally right after Brett leaves. Right after he could have saved him. But yeah. First death of this serial. And more to come. More to come.
A lot more to come. So, then we see Marvik Chen explaining he's going on a holiday. And everyone's like, why is he going on a holiday? But that's not explained for another episode still. And then we cut back, and the Doctor has left the TARDIS and told Katarina to stay inside because he wants to go find medicine for Steven.
So he makes his way through the jungle, and he runs into Kurt, who decides to steal the Doctor's...
he runs into Brett.
Right, Brett, my bad.
Kurt died.
Yeah, Kurt died. My bad. He runs into Brett, who decides to steal his TARDIS key so he can get into the TARDIS, which he does.
And then Katarina's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, the old man sent me. And she's like, oh, okay. And he's like, yep, no. Does anybody know how to fly this thing? She's like, no, only the Doctor knows. It's his ship. So he's like, wow, it really is a marvelous ship. He wasn't lying.
And meanwhile, the Doctor is really pissed because someone just stole his TARDIS. So he makes his way quickly back to the TARDIS and realizes that Brett left the key in the door.
Nice.
So he gets back into the TARDIS, obviously, and
at this point, Steven's already somehow stood up and knocked out Brett.
And they strap him down to a chair.
Right.
And then the Doctor goes back out to get the medicine that he was trying to get before. And while out in the jungle, he runs into some Daleks. He's like, whoa, what are you guys doing here?
Uh-oh.
So he starts running back towards the TARDIS to alert everyone. But in the meanwhile, Brett has given Katarina some... Well, he's told Katarina to take some medicine from his pocket to give to Steven.
Right, because the Doctor put Brett into some sort of magnetic chair that holds him immobile through magic science.
The first of several magnetic force fields in this serial.
And so he gives Katarina the thingy, the tablet, and she's like, what's a tablet? And he's like, oh my gosh, just give it to that guy. And she's like, okay. And then they leave the TARDIS.
And yeah, Steven actually gets healed. And
surprisingly.
Stuff. Yeah. They are in 4,000 super medicine. But they still use tapes, as we're going to see.
That's true. So the Doctor's worried about the Daleks, and he's like, why are you guys out of the TARDIS? What are you doing? And he's like, the Daleks showed up. And he's like, oh no, better go to the city, because that's the last place they'd expect us.
But it turns out the Daleks are also in control of the city. So
while this is all going on, we keep seeing shots of the meeting at the city, or between Marvik Chen and Zephon.
Right, who are two members of the Daleks' newly formed Galactic Council, which they formed in Mission to the Unknown.
Right.
And Zephon and Mavic Chen kind of hate each other.
Yeah, they both see the other one as a threat to their power, and they don't like each other, and they want to kill each other, probably. So, the Doctor and Co. are in the city.
And they decide to take one of the spaceships in the landing bay. Well, first they run into Zephon, who's by himself, because the meeting between the Daleks and the other races has already started, and then Zephon, just to show off his power to Mavic Chen, is like, I'll go to the meeting when I want. So he starts wandering around the halls, and he runs into the Doctor and everyone, and they knock him out.
Yep.
And the Doctor tells Steven, Brett, and Katarina to go steal a ship while he puts on Zephon's robe and sits in on the council meeting to find out what the Daleks are up to.
So he does, and they go steal the ship, and then in the meeting, well, first the Daleks like, where is Zephon? And then they go find him, like, Zephon, come with us. We will start the meeting now. So he goes to the meeting as Zephon, the Doctor that is, and at the meeting, Mavic Chen is like, here's the core to the Time Destructor. It's solid block of terranium that took 50 years to mine. And then they find Zephon's body, and the alarm goes off.
Right. Apparently their plan involves compressing time or something. Destroying stuff.
We don't know what it does. It's just called the Time Destructor.
Right. It just does something bad. Presumably. And it's powered by the terranium core, which Mavic Chen supplied, which is apparently the most rare metal.
And then, in the brilliant show of intelligence, when the alarm goes off, he leaves it on the table, and the Doctor just takes it and walks away.
They jack the spaceship and leave!
With the terranium! And the Dalek's like, where is the terranium? This is a plot by you, Mavic Chen, isn't it? And he's like, what? No, why would I do this? It must be you then, Zephon. And Zephon dies.
Nice going, Mavic Chen. Was able to turn the blame on Zephon just by saying it was Zephon.
Yep. So he's dead.
Yep. And there's way more to come. Way more deaths to come.
Yeah, a lot happened in just 6 episodes, now that I think about it.
Yeah, to be honest, even though this is a 12-episode serial, I've been pretty okay with it so far, because it's pretty fast-moving, pretty fast-paced.
It's moving pretty quickly.
I'm enjoying it so far. It doesn't feel like they've wasted any episodes on long, drawn-out things that could have been compressed, which is a good thing.
Right.
So at that point, the Doctor and everyone else is in the ship, and the Daleks don't want to shoot them down because they've
got the terranium.
Right, they've got the terranium. And so they decide to remotely control their ship and have them crash land on this nearby planet, which is, I guess, a prison colony?
Yeah. And somehow, whatchamacallit, Brett regains control of the ship and lands it safely. This is actually episode 3 at this point.
Yeah. We forgot to mention, but... So, they're on this planet, and these 3 convicts see them land, so they decide to go jack their ship.
But one of them is too scared, so he runs away.
Right. Kirkson, the guy who's too scared, runs away. So
yeah, at this point, the Doctor's like, well, hurry up and get the ship repaired. Katarina, you take that cord and plug it in over there. And she's like, okay. And then he, dumps it outside. He's like, that should keep anybody away. And then the 2 hijackers, move towards the ladder, and then the Doctor's like, quick, turn it on. So she does, and it shocks them. And then she's like, ah! And then the Doctor gives this speech about how he doesn't want to kill anybody, and that'll just knock them out for a bit.
And Brett's like, yo, can't get anywhere without being that nice, or you can't get anywhere by being that nice.
Oh, yeah.
But, so they're about to leave, because apparently they've repaired the ship. But then Kirkson gets on board and holds Katerina at knife point.
Yeah.
And asks them to take him to,
back to Kemble.
And everyone's like, whoa, okay, man.
So in episode 4, they pretend like they're gonna go to Kemble, but then Kirkson goes insane and takes Katerina into the airlock with him, and then Katerina pushes the button and they fly out into space and Katerina dies.
Yep. First death of a companion.
She only lasted 4 episodes.
Yeah. And then the Doctor gives her more of a farewell speech than he does to Vicky.
Yeah. There's this whole... She was just doing what she knew how to do. She was saving all of us.
And then Ian's like, no, I think she just pressed it by accident.
Ian shows up. No, hi guys. She just pushed it by accident.
No, Steven says that.
We used the Dalek time machine to show up here again, Doctor. How's it going?
Right, the one that blew up.
Hey, maybe they made a side trip before going back to 65.
Steal thousands of Dalek time machines.
No, Steven's like, yeah, she just did it by accident.
So, yeah. Apparently, the writers decided to write out Katerina because they were running into challenges with her character because she didn't know anything, basically. And I guess they were having trouble writing
makes sense.
that kind of character, which does make sense. And I also read that since this was the first death of a companion, they decided to do it in the most dramatic way possible.
Yeah.
Which they got that down.
Maybe overly dramatic in some aspects.
Yeah. But Katerina retrospective? I don't know.
She had 4 episodes and all of them were in the serial.
And she didn't do anything, really. She was kind of just there. So, gotta say, most useless companion so far.
Comparable to Barbara's first 4 episodes.
Yeah, actually.
But she probably wouldn't... Katerina probably had less to go anywhere. From here. Like, she didn't know anything, so she had less to work with.
And I think she even did less than Barbara. Because she barely contributed to any conversations, to be honest.
Well, she didn't really know what they were talking about, so she was just like...
This is true, which is why they wrote her out, so... Farewell, Katerina. You will be missed. You're right out. What? Well, yeah, not really.
There's always going to be that one fan that's like, yeah, Katerina was the best companion. And everyone will just look at him and be like, you do know there were like 80 other episodes of the first Doctor that have better companions than that, right?
And he's like, yeah, go Katerina. But no, actually, I like to write out more than Vicky's.
Well, yeah, because the Doctor gave him such a farewell.
And honestly, dying is a better way to get written out than, oh look, I'm just going to stay in ancient Greece because true love, and there's my cousin.
Well, I don't know, it worked for Susan.
It worked more for Susan because there was
she had a reason to leave.
Right, and there was this
Vicky didn't.
subplot leading up to it rather than, oh look, I'm in love, 1 episode later.
There was no subplot leading up to Katerina just going, nope. Space.
But it was dramatic and cool.
I feel like they knew they were going to write her out as soon as she stepped onto the TARDIS, because her first line inside the TARDIS is, they told me I was going to die.
Yeah, they probably knew.
Oh well.
But there goes her.
For the first death of a companion, I don't feel anything.
Because she was only here for 4 episodes.
Yeah, I wasn't attached to her. I laughed at how absurd it was.
I thought it was pretty dark, actually. Like, that's a terrible way to die.
But it was so unexpected.
Get sucked out of an airplane.
It was so unexpected. You would never think a girl from Troy would fly out into space and die in the year 4000.
Well, when you put it that way, it just sounds ridiculous.
Exactly.
But we forgot to mention that Kirkson also dies.
True.
Because he's in the
He kind of deserved that.
You know what? I feel worse for Kirkson than I do for Carrie. No.
Well, he was a prisoner on the prison planet.
Yeah.
I don't know if he deserved it or not. We only met him for 5 minutes. Well, it's probably more than 5 minutes, but it felt like 5 minutes.
But yeah, after that, the Doctor, Steven, and Brett decide to head back to Earth to notify the Space Security Service, or whatever
they're
they're
going
called.
to talk to Daxter.
Right. They're going to talk to Daxter about the conspiracy by Mavic Chen.
Right. So the Daleks are like, wow, Daleks, you failed. Exterminate all of you. They just kill off a Dalek invasion of Force off-screen. It mentions in the wiki that the Dalek Supreme orders the pursuit who failed to be killed, which he does that again later in the serial. He just kills off hundreds of his own troops.
Yep.
That's off-screen, so we don't count that.
So Mavic Chen has somehow made it back to Earth before the Doctor and everyone.
Which doesn't even make sense.
Well, it kind of does. The
ship would have to be faster than the Doctor's, because the Doctor's flying in Mavic Chen's ship, remember? And it's like a space cruiser. The spot.
Yeah, but they waste time on that prison planet.
Yeah,
whereas
but Mavic Chen doesn't leave till after that prison planet scene, because he's with the Daleks when they tell him that they failed to capture them on the prison planet.
I guess so. Yeah, he does make it back to Earth before that, though. So I don't know what happened there.
Warp drive. Mr. Sulu laying a course for Earth. But so he gets home, and it turns out it's more than just him in on the conspiracy.
Right, there's this guy named, what was his name? The bald guy? What was his name?
Carlton?
Was he ever named?
Chen conspires with the head of the security service, Carlton, on his woes with regard to the Terranium.
Okay, so I guess it's Carlton. But, yeah, he's in on it too. And who knows how many other people. But,
yeah.
But Carlton is kind of conspiring behind the scenes to usurp Mavic Chen's position once he...
Or at least that's implied.
Yeah.
We don't know yet. Presumably that's how it's going to go.
Right. So Mavic Chen orders... Because he thinks it's Brett and Kurt who have hijacked his ship. So he orders the rest of the security police to kill them.
Right, and he tells the girl Sarah, like, about the stolen Terranium, like the true reason why he wants the traitors to be killed. Like, he doesn't tell the rest of the force, but he tells Sarah. Yeah,
and she goes off to try and find the quote-unquote traitors. And at that point, the Doctor, Steven, and Brett have made their way back to Earth.
Or the experimental ship or whatever they landed
on. So Brett calls up Daxter, his friend, to explain the situation, and they do, but they leave out the part about the Terranium, and then Daxter mentions the Terranium to them.
And then the Doctor's like, so you're in on this too, aren't you? And he's like, what? No, I don't know anything. He's like, I never mentioned the Terranium. And then Daxter's like, Brett, you couldn't believe this, man. You must have heard him say the Terranium. He's like, how did you know about the Terranium, Daxter? And he's like, what are you doing? And then Brett just shoots him.
Yep. Brett just out of nowhere kills him.
And the Doctor's like, you know how I feel about killing people.
And then Brett's like, he was a traitor. It had to have been done.
And they're like, come, we have to get out of here. No one's safe here. And then they leave, and then Sarah shows up, and Brett makes a distraction or something,
allowing the Doctor and Steven to run away. He talks to Sarah for a few moments, and then Sarah kills him!
Yeah! Brett and Daxter die!
Within minutes of each other! Within minutes of returning to Earth or the satellite or whatever they are, wherever they are. Yeah.
So now episode 5.
Tons of deaths. Yes, episode 5. What was wrong with episode 5?
Just the scene where they get transported. So they go to this room and they're examining this. The Doctor and Steven are examining this case thing, and there's a mouse in it. So Steven and the Doctor are examining the case, and there's a mouse in it, and the Doctor's like, must be some sort of experiment. And then Sarah shows up and is like, alright, hand over the terranium. And the Doctor's like, no. And then the door closes, and then
some episode 1 stuff goes down. It's this weird inverted scene with them screaming in agony, but the Doctor looks really happy.
And then we see Carlton talking to some guy, and he's like, what was going on in that room? And he's like, a test in molecular dissemination.
We were trying to send mice halfway across the galaxy.
To the planet Myra. And he's like, well, will they survive? And he's like, I don't know, we've never sent humans before.
And he's like, stop the experiment, stop it right now. And they're like, nope.
It's too late, it's already been done. And then he's like, don't worry, it should start transmitting when they get to Myra, which is several light years away. And then it defies all physics.
Yeah, Dylan was kind of upset about how this breaks all known laws of physics when we were watching. But
the transmission on Myra is immediately received by the station, but Myra is light years away. The fastest the transmission can travel is at the speed of light, which means it would take years for the transmission to get from Myra to the space station.
Well, all I have to say about that is it's a show about a time-traveling police box. A lot of the fake science hasn't made sense. So I'm not too bothered by it. But
it's just because we just learned that in physics. It was on my brain.
But either way, they end up on Myra.
And they survived. Luckily.
Yep. And Steven and the Doctor come to before Sarah, and Steven takes her gun. And then Sarah wakes up, and they get to talking about how she just killed Brett, and she reveals that Brett was her brother.
Well, she's saying all these things like she didn't really care. And she's like, yeah, he was a traitor. And then she's like, he was my brother. And I'm just like, well, that doesn't make it any better.
Well, what I thought she meant by that was she was less easy on him being a traitor, even though he wasn't, because she was her brother. It's like, you know how if someone does something bad, right, you're like, well, that's pretty bad, but like you don't really care. But then if someone in your family does it, you're actually invested in it and you actually care. So I feel like she was just harder on Brett because of that, but she didn't have to kill him.
Yeah.
And at this point,
you wouldn't kill your family members.
At this point, I was like, what's wrong with this family that they're so willing to kill people? It's like Brett killed Daxter, and then Sarah immediately killed Brett without any warning.
Yeah, and Brett just wanted to kill Kirkson and Katarina.
Yeah.
He just wanted to open the airlock and let them out, even though Katarina does that anyway.
So, the Doctor reveals that he knows about Myra, and that there's this species there called the Vizians, which are 8-foot-tall, savage, invisible creatures. Really overpowered. But back with Mavic Chen and Carlton, Mavic Chen is like, damn, they're on Myra, what are we gonna do now? And then Carlton suggests telling the Daleks that Mavic Chen sent them there on purpose, because Myra's pretty close to Kemble.
Right.
And it would be easier for the Daleks to just go there, get the terranium, and then get back to Kemble.
By the way, during this whole adventure, the TARDIS is still sitting on Kemble.
Yep.
Just in case anyone's confused.
Yep. They haven't been using the TARDIS at all. It is still right where it landed on Kemble. And how they get back to it is anyone's guess at this point. Well,
although it happens in episode 6. It happens
in the next episode. But at this point, they're on Myra without any way to get off.
Right. So, the Doctor and Sarah are walking around, and Steven, they're walking around, and then the Daleks show up. And you're surrounded. And they're like, well, it appears, my friends, that Daleks have won.
Well, first the Daleks kill a couple Vizians.
No, they kill the Vizians afterwards because that creates a distraction for the Doctor to escape.
No, they land, kill the Vizians, then they meet the Doctor. Then they fight the Vizians, but it doesn't show any specific inverted death scenes.
Jeez. Something like that. But at the beginning of episode 6, they escape anyway. And steal the Dalek ship.
Right. Thanks, Vizians. You made a great distraction. And then what I thought was that they just made the Vizians invisible because they didn't have the budget to create another alien race.
Probably. I mean, I'm guessing they blew their entire budget on this 12-episode serial, and the next 4-episode serials are all gonna not have great special effects.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe they'll be historical.
Well, they spread it out equally by episode. That they gave each episode a certain budget, and just, I don't know, for this episode they didn't have enough for months. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. We'll see eventually.
There's only 2 historical serials in this season left. I think all the rest of them aren't.
Well, there's only 4 left. No,
there's a couple in the Second Doctor's era, but they're not solely historical. Anyway.
All right, the Second Doctor goes into
Scotland. The Highlanders.
No, I was going to say that season 4 contains both First and Second Doctor.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, but either way, they steal the Daleks' ship and make their way back to Kemble to get back to the TARDIS. And the Daleks smartly only had one Dalek guarding the ship.
Yeah, and Steven just puts mud on his eye and they get in the ship and they escape.
Yep.
And then the Dalek Supreme is like, well, they failed. Kill them off.
So, once in space, the Daleks try and remotely control their ship again. To send it back to Kemble.
Steven just tears out the control device.
Yeah.
But they go to Kemble anyway.
Then they use the they realize that their way of controlling the ship is now null, so they just use this giant magnet beam or whatever.
Yeah. And there's another magnetic force field in this episode because while they're on the ship, the Doctor decides he should make a replica of the Terranium to give to the Daleks.
Right, to use as bargaining material so they can bring him back to the TARDIS.
Right,
because they're
he makes a pretty good copy. I don't know what out of.
Yeah.
But he needs to power it up for some reason. So Steven suggests using the gravitational power of the ship's core.
Something like that. He suggests using the power of the magnet that's pulling them in to, power up the Terranium.
Something like that. And then Sarah's like, you don't know anything. You're from, 1,000 years in the past. Which is the first time Steven's not been the one who knows everything.
Yeah. So he's like, I'll show you, and he does it anyway, and gets knocked out.
And then he wakes up and he's surrounded by a force field. He can't move. Nice going, Steven.
But it works. It powers up the Terranium.
The Doctor supports Oculus.
Right, every time they look at the Terranium outside of its casing, they have to wear these special goggles or headgear or whatever it is.
They look like the Oculus Rift. Doctor supports Oculus.
So eventually they get drawn back into Kemble by the giant magnet. Or the tractor beam.
So the Doctor has this insane plan that the audience doesn't know about, but Sarah's like, that's never gonna work. Brett and Sarah seem to share the fact that they don't believe the Doctor's plans will work.
I kind of agree with them if I had just heard one of the Doctor's plans for the first time. Because they usually sound like they won't work. And they usually do. Often not in the way the Doctor was envisioning.
Well, this time it did.
This time it worked perfectly.
So the Doctor's like, we'll give you the Terranium in front of my ship. So the Daleks are like, okay.
Well, at first the Daleks don't want to, but then Maddox Chen convinces them to do it, because he just wants the Terranium.
Right, so they go to the ship, and the Doctor's like, my friend here will give you the Terranium as soon as my other friend and I are inside the ship. So him and Sarah go inside the TARDIS.
Steven comes out with the Terranium, hands it over, and as he's getting back into the TARDIS, the Daleks shoot him, but they end up just destroying the force field. Steven is unharmed, and they make their way back into the TARDIS and leave.
And the Daleks are confused. And that's the end of episode 6.
Well, other than that scene where the Doctor's like, the air outside is very dangerous. Why, you ask? Because it's dangerous. And then it ends.
Yeah, because the TARDIS breaks down at the end. I mean, no surprise there, but the scanner stops working and the time rotor stops going up and down.
Right.
So, it's common practice for there to be Christmas specials, but they decided to put the Christmas special in the middle of the serial.
Right, so episode 7 of this serial fell on Christmas, and they were like, wait, many people may not watch this episode, so let's just have some random, still canon storyline that has nothing to do with the rest of the serial.
Yeah, it's super humorous and boring. Well, just chaotic. So it begins where episode 6 ended, with the Doctor like, oh, it's super polluted and stuff. And then he steps outside and it's England. Oh, okay.
And then they meet some drunk police officers. And, you know, to be honest, I don't even know what happened in this episode.
Oh, so the Doctor goes down to the police station because the Doctor originally got out to fix the scanner, but then they take him to the police station. And then Steven decides it would be a good plan to see where the Doctor went, and then he steals some policeman clothes from the back of the car and pretends to be a policeman, and also goes to the station. And then at the station, the Doctor's complaining that they're, like, trying to steal his house, which is the TARDIS. And they're like, you live in a police box? What?
And then he just willingly tells them that he's a time traveler, even though he's tried to cover it up before.
He's like, no, yeah, it travels through time. And they're like, what? Are you insane? And then Steven shows up, pretends to be from the North, some new recruit, and yeah. He comes for the old man, gets confused with another old man, but then he gets the Doctor. Meanwhile, Vicky...
Sarah, you mean?
Sarah. I thought it was Vicky for some reason. Sarah decides, okay, I'm gonna go fix the scanner because they're useless. And she goes outside, and then the drunk police cop's like, yo, just go to the party. Like, stop hanging out outside this sketch police box. Bye now. And she's like, wow, okay. And then the Doctor and Steven come back, fix the scanner, go inside, and they all leave. And that's only half the episode.
Yeah, really, really boring at this point. I was just like, oh, why does this exist?
It was hilarious, though. Even if it was terrible, it was funny.
Well, the next part of the episode was just like, why? Why?
They materialize, and it looks like ancient or something.
Yeah, it looks like ancient, Arabia or whatever.
Yeah.
They're hanging out with some sort of sheik or whatever. But it turns out to just be a Hollywood set.
And there's more than one filming going on, and the Doctor gets confused for some professor on Arabian... Oh, actually, no, they materialize in the logging camp.
Oh, right.
And then they save the girl from being cut in half, and then the director's like, what the hell, guys? And then they're like, whoa, we didn't know this was a movie set. Okay, we'll leave then. And then they get caught up in Arabia, and the Doctor gets confused.
Sarah climbs into a sarcophagus. Why does she do that? Why?
And then Steven and the Doctor end up in the changing room, and then the Doctor gets confused as a professor, and then they think Steven is like an extra. And there's a humorous scene where the policeman's chasing Steven, and they come back on screen and Steven's chasing the policeman. By policeman, I mean some guy in a police costume.
And I'd just like to say that since this was a reconstruction, all we basically had to go by was the audio, which in this particular episode was just absolute chaos. It was yelling. What sounded like dozens of people talking at the same time.
At some point, the Doctor ends up back at the TARDIS, and he's talking to some guy who's like, I want to be a singer, but who's going to be a singer with a name like Bing Crosby? And then he walks away, and the Doctor's just like, And then they somehow all end up back in the TARDIS. And then the Doctor breaks the fourth wall.
Yep. He turns to face the audience and says, wishes us a Merry Christmas. And then it ends. And that was the 7th episode of the Daleks Master Plan.
Chaos. Absolute chaos.
Any enjoyment I would have gotten out of this was, I guess, muted by the fact that the placement was just terrible. Like, it totally breaks the tension of this serial. And it would have been better if this didn't even exist.
Yep. No argument.
Yeah.
So then we get to episode 8.
And this is where it kind of starts to get better.
Yeah,
kind of.
At least.
Kind of.
It gets back to the plot.
Yeah.
What happens in episode 8? I completely forgot, because all I remember from that day is the chaos that was episode 7.
Well, the Daleks find out that the Terranium the Doctor gave them is fake. So...
Right.
So they're like, Mavic Chen. What the heck, Mavic Chen?
You're coming with us, yo. We're gonna go get that Terranium back.
But then Mavic Chen's like, what? It wasn't me. It must have been the Doctor. And then they kill another one of the Alliance members for no reason.
Yeah, he was in some chamber to test the time destructor, and it doesn't work, and that's how they find out it's fake, and then the dog's like, you know what, just kill him anyway. So they did.
Yeah, so this guy named Trantis dies. He had his 3 seconds of screen time.
And then he died.
But then the Doctor and friends land on...
a cricket pitch.
Yeah.
Well, they find out there's a ship following them first.
Right.
And they're like, what?
And they're like, we need to lose it, so they land...
In a cricket pitch. And then there's another humorous scene where it's just showing the commentators for the match, and they're just talking about the match, and like, oh, this is unprecedented. There appears to be a police box in the middle of the field now. I want to check the rules to see if this has ever happened before.
They're just completely unfazed by it. They're like talking about how the players have to deal with it.
They're like, yeah, there's going to be an interesting problem here. The players are going to have to play around the police box. And then, like, the guy's just... One of the guys looking to see if it's in the rulebook, the other guy's watching, and just disappears, and he sees it disappear, and he's like, well, Bill, it looks like the police box has disappeared off the field. The game can now continue. England needs to score 42 runs. Like 20 runs in the next 42 minutes now. Because they were talking about the time delay, because they didn't think England was going to be able to win in 45 minutes. Like, it might take about 15 minutes to get this police box off the field. How do you think that's going to affect England's game? Just like, oh, okay.
Yep.
And then they land on a volcano.
And
thing.
Last week we were talking about how we didn't think there was a lot of filler or stretched out content in this serial, and just based on episodes 7 and 8, there actually does start to be a lot.
Yeah, the monk shows up.
Yep. He fixed his TARDIS, and he wants to get revenge.
So he also lands on the volcano planet. Meanwhile, the dog's like, let's launch a time machine and go get the Doctor. So we still have those. And they send Chen along, and they're like, alright, let's go.
And then the monk confronts the Doctor, telling him how he locked him out of his TARDIS, but the Doctor's like, oh, did you?
Haha, no you didn't. And he goes, and it's like, oh, he locked us out of the TARDIS, guys.
But then he uses his ring that can open the door.
The magic ring we talked about before. And...
Magic plot device.
Then they leave.
And the monk is like, what?
Curses!
No. But he follows them again. And they wind up in ancient Egypt.
Yeah, it's episode 9 now.
And this is where it starts to get better.
Well, so the Doctor sees another ship following them, and he thinks it might be the monk again. And then they land. So the Doctor's like, alright, I'm going to fix the lock, because in this serial, everything is just breaking with the TARDIS. And
when isn't it, though? When isn't it, though?
That's true. Sarah and Steven decide, hey, let's go check to see if that's actually the monk. And then they go in, and they see the Daleks. And they're like, oh. And then they get captured by Egyptians. We're about to see the biggest massacre in Doctor Who so far coming up soon. But,
So then the monk also lands. And his TARDIS can actually disguise itself, so it disguises as a
giant block of stone. Right, and then how does the Doctor figure out that...
It's the Daleks?
Yeah.
Well, the Doctor's like, better go find Steven and Sarah now that I fixed the lock. La 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 la. And then he sees...
Oh, right, was that
he finds the monk.
Yeah, there was that montage, though.
He sees the monk land, so then he's like, oh, if the monk just landed, who was the other ones? And he's like, oh, the Daleks. And then he decides he's going to follow the monk, so he follows the monk for a while.
And then the monk runs into the Daleks, who want to exterminate him, but then Mavic Chen is like, no, we can use him for our own purposes. And they find out that he knows the Doctor, so they ask him to pretend to befriend the Doctor to get the Terranium.
But right before this is when the Daleks see the Egyptians, and the Egyptians are like, oh shoot, war machines, and they try to attack it, and then just like 10 of them die. 10 Egyptians
10 Egyptians die.
They get killed by the Daleks.
And then... Yep. Just...
So the Doctor saw the monk talking to the Daleks, and he knows that the monk is going to try, like, befriend the Doctor, even though it's a lie, to just get the Terranium. So then the Doctor's like, well, I wonder where Sarah and Steven are. So it cuts to Sarah and Steven, and they escape.
Yeah, Sarah cuts out of the restraints using a broken piece of glass or something. And they try to go find the Doctor. They try to go back to the TARDIS, but it's gone.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, it must have been taken into the pyramid, because the Egyptians are, like, loading stuff into a pyramid for someone's burial, I guess.
Right.
So they think the Doctor probably... If the TARDIS is in the pyramid, they think the Doctor's probably there too, so they go into the pyramid. And before that, you see the Doctor confront the monk in the pyramid.
Before that, the Doctor steals the directional unit from the monk's TARDIS and turns it into a police box. And then he goes and confronts the monk at his TARDIS. And then Sarah and Steven show up, and the Doctor's nowhere to be found.
But then a mummy climbs out of a sarcophagus, and like, that episode ends.
And then now we're into episode 10.
Where we find out that the mummy is just the monk. So he tells them that... the monk tells Sarah and Steven that he wants to ask the Doctor for forgiveness, but the Doctor's nowhere to be found.
And Steven is skeptical since he's had dealings with the monk before. And Sarah hasn't. So she's like, well, maybe he's telling the truth. And Steven's like, no.
But either way, they accompany each other out of the pyramid, and then they run into the Daleks. And the monk is like, look at these hostages I brought for you. And then Steven's like, yep, I told you.
And then they get captured. And then in the Dalek time machine, the monk's like, that was quick thinking by me, wasn't it? And Steven's like, we don't need any more of your quick thinking, monk. You're just going to get us killed.
So at first they're going to kill them, but then Mavic Chen convinces the Daleks to use them as a bargaining tool to get the Terranium back from the Doctor. And to be honest, I think Mavic Chen and the Daleks make a pretty good team. Aside from Mavic Chen's power hungriness, like, the Daleks are so quick to exterminate everything and just use force to try and get their own way, but Mavic Chen is a bit more cunning, and he really helps the Daleks achieve what they want to achieve this serial.
But I feel like if they just exterminated everything in ancient Egypt, they would have got the Terranium way quicker.
Yeah, their alliance eventually leads to their downfall, but it could have worked out. I think it could have worked out.
I think that if the Daleks had just killed everyone off, the Doctor would have been like, I wonder where they are, and then run into the Daleks, and then he would have been captured. I mean, for some reason, during this whole serial, you're not allowed to fire at someone who's holding the Terranium. I guess because it would blow up and destroy it? I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's like a key plot point.
There's some other discrepancies about the Terranium that happened later, but anyway, Mavic Chen uses a giant loudspeaker, because they don't know where the Doctor is, and he hasn't shown up for a long time at this point. So we were like, where's the Doctor? But Mavic Chen asks the Doctor over a giant loudspeaker to
return the Turanium because they've got hostages. And then the Egyptians are like, it's the voice of God. Well, one of them is, and the other one's like, no, that's the war machines, yo.
So the doctor does agree to return the Turanium for Sarah and Steven. And he asks it to be done on his terms.
Again.
Yeah, and they listen again.
Every time.
Even though the doctor actually holds no power in this position. They could have just been like, nope, return the Turanium or we're killing your companions. But they don't, so
they do the meet
in front of the TARDIS, like the doctor asked.
No,
in front of
the temple.
Temple.
And he tries to, like, capture Mavic Chen, but fails because the Egyptians show up.
And then a bunch more Egyptians die.
Yeah, part of that 10 was now, and part of the 10 was earlier, but 10 Egyptians die. Genocide.
And the
Doctor, Sarah, and Steven get to the TARDIS, and he's like, I had to give them the Turanium. I tried to capture Mavic Chen, but I failed. And they're like, well, we can, like, go back to Kemble's like, nah, directional unit's broken, yo. But I do have this one from the monk's TARDIS we can try.
Yes, the doctor stole the monk's directional unit, so now they can know where they're going, but...
Well,
but that kind of fails.
They plug it in, and the screen goes all white, and you think they've died. And then episode 10...
Right, because the doctor's like, it'll either work or explode and kill us all. Worth it.
10 out of 10.
So, in the next episode, I think this is in the next episode,
Yeah,
you see the monk.
now.
You see the monk.
No, that was at the end of 10.
Oh.
Right before they activate the directional unit. And he just...
Oh, right, so you see the monk get back to his TARDIS, because he's being pursued by the Daleks.
Right.
And he leaves, and he winds up on an unknown planet, and he's like, what? My directional unit is missing. Curse you, Doctor! And then he never shows up again.
Ever. He's done.
Which is a shame. I thought he was a pretty good...
Presumably he's still wandering the universe, looking for a directional unit.
Should bring him back in the reboot.
He shows up in the audio dramas. He faces off against the 8th Doctor.
Right.
I don't know, they replaced the monk with an equally similar character named the Master, also a Time Lord, and also a nemesis of the Doctor, but way longer lived.
But anyway, on to episode 11.
They think the directional unit has just blown itself out, and they're dead. The Doctor's like, well, scanner's still broke for some reason. Well,
and
no,
like,
it looks like Kemble. They're like, might be Kemble. They go outside.
And it is Kemble. And they're like, oh, I guess the TARDIS traveled before the directional unit exploded, so we're on Kemble.
I'm like, yep.
Which, honestly, was just a plot device to get them back to Kemble, but not have them know where they're going in any future serial.
I think it would have been funny if they'd accidentally taken the monk's TARDIS.
Yeah.
And then the whole rest of the series was actually in the monk's TARDIS, and the camouflage circuit was working all the time. And they just never changed. But that's not what happened, so that's sad.
So they decide to try and get to the city, the Dalek city on Kemble, because they're on Kemble now.
Right.
So they're walking through the jungle, and then Steven and Sarah are like, wait, where's the Doctor?
Again.
He just leaves, I guess, and he doesn't show up for, like, a long time, actually.
Then he shows up and it's all like, a boss, and just ends the serial in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But anyway, in the city, we see that Mavic Chen and the Daleks have returned.
With the Turanium. And
they have a galactic council, and Mavic Chen claims that he's now the ruler of the council, and then the Daleks leave and lock them all in a cell.
Because they were planning on killing all their allies anyway. So
they just needed the Turanium.
So Steven and Sarah get to the city. They think the Doctor's there, and so begins a long conversation between Steven and Sarah about where the Doctor is, and it's just them second-guessing themselves and making assumptions. And I'm like, what? Was this just filler dialogue?
Sarah's like, the doctor's probably here. And Steven's like, yeah, he's probably here. And then Sarah's like, well, I don't see any Daleks, so maybe the doctor's not here. And Steven's like, no, definitely here.
Then Sarah's like,
where is everyone? And then they're like, let's lock ourselves in the Dalek time machine, and that'll make the Daleks have to bring us the doctor.
So they do that. Well, they announce over a speaker system that
they're going to do that.
They're going to do that, and that they need the doctor brought to them right then and there. But the doctor's not even there, nor are the Daleks. So from their cell, the Galactic Alliance somehow answers their message.
It was their one phone call.
Oh, right. One phone call. Right, yeah.
Let's just call the reception area of the prison.
So they ask them to, they ask Sarah and Steven to free them because the Daleks have betrayed them, and now they have a common enemy.
And then Mavic Chen is like, yeah, thanks, Sarah, for coming back for me. You're the best. I'll get you a promotion or something. Thanks, yo.
And then Sarah's like, what the heck, Chen? What the heck?
You're dumb. You're a joke.
So they let the Alliance go back to their planets to warn their people and their armies that the Daleks are about to take over the universe.
Right.
And they watch the ships take off, but Mavic Chen's explodes. So they're like, well, guess he's dead. And they worry that Earth isn't going to get the message.
So like, better get back to the TARDIS, hope the doctor's there, gotta go back to Earth.
So they go back into the jungle, but they see a Dalek, and it goes into some sort of hidden underground bunker, and they're like, we should have known, the Daleks have another base.
And then Mavic Chen shows up.
With a gun. And he's like, I'm not dead, I faked my own death.
And clearly you guys are working with the Dalek. You helped betray me. Now you're gonna take me in there, and I'm gonna use you as hostages. I think Mavic Chen went insane.
Yeah, he did.
Like, actually.
He actually did go insane.
And so that ends episode 11. And now episode 12.
The doctor still hasn't shown up.
Yeah, just...
Where is he?
Mavic Chen wants to know too. But Steven and Sarah are like, we don't know. And Mavic Chen's like, BS.
So he brings them into the Dalek underground bunker. And... was this the point where the creepy music started to play?
Yes.
Yeah. So during this, I think this entire episode, there was that creepy, it was really fitting and I liked it, background music, but it just went on for like the whole episode, so I was like, okay, it's kind of weird.
It stopped when the time just, well, I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah.
Even though I'm going to get there in like 2 minutes.
Yeah. So... Mavic Chen tries to use Sarah and Steven as hostages.
But then the Daleks are just like, thanks, nope, we're just gonna kill all of you. And Mavic Chen tries to run away, and they kill him. And he dies. For good, this time.
Yep. So I guess he and the Daleks really were incompatible after all. Just maybe because he went insane. Yeah. As I was saying, if his thirst for power didn't go to his head, then I think Mavic Chen and the Daleks could have been a pretty good evil team.
And then the doctor shows up. It's like, hey, Steven, Sarah, get yourselves out of here. Here's the key. Go to the TARDIS. I'm about to sacrifice my own life and use the time destructor, and we're all going to die. So use the TARDIS. Bye. Peace.
And Sarah doesn't want him to do it, but Steven trusts the doctor.
So he goes back to the TARDIS, but Sarah just ditches Steven and shows back up, and the doctor's like, what are you doing, Sarah? Go back to the TARDIS.
Yep.
To be honest, probably her biggest mistake.
Yeah, and her last mistake.
So the Daleks, they don't want to shoot the doctor because he's got the time destructor in his hands now, which is slowly but surely killing everyone, I guess.
Right, the doctor activates the time destructor.
Like, why?
Yeah,
all he had to do was leave with it, and everyone would have survived.
Yeah.
And then
but then again, we never would have got to see the time destructor in action, so...
That's not a good trade-off! Especially with what happens next!
So the doctor and Sarah slowly make their way back to the TARDIS with the time destructor Destructor in tow. And it's just slowly aging them and
the planet.
And killing everything in its wake.
And there's no off switch.
Right, the Doctor...
Who designs a device like that without an off switch?
Yes, the Doctor's like, yeah, you actually can't turn this off until the Terranium runs out.
We have to get into the TARDIS to neutralize it. And the Daleks show up while chasing them, and then the planet gets turned into a desert.
Right, it kills all the foliage, it kills the Daleks, and it's slowly killing the Doctor and Sarah. You see Sarah has aged a lot. She looks like an old woman now.
And then Steven looks out the scanner's like, whoa, it's a desert now, what the hell? And he goes outside, he's like, whoa, Doctor, no! And he kicks the time destructor away, and then he's like, Sarah, no! And she's just bones.
Right.
She's dead.
Yeah, you thought Sarah was going to be the next companion? Nope.
She's dead.
She's dead.
and then
really disappointing.
And then Steven reverses the time destructor and gets the Doctor into the TARDIS. Or something like that.
Doesn't the time destructor just, like, run out?
Well, they get into the TARDIS and then it runs out.
Yeah. So,
and, like, 6 Daleks die after Sarah. They get aged into just embryos.
Right. And for some reason, the Doctor survives, even though he's a lot older than Sarah. I mean, he ages too, but he lives.
Well, he's a Time Lord.
He is a Time Lord. So I guess that's how you can justify it, but...
Supposedly, he ages 100 years thanks to the Time Destructor, which is sometimes used as an explanation for why he kind of collapses and regenerates when he does, instead of later.
Yeah, it makes sense. But...
Noble sacrifice.
Shortly after the Time Destructor... I keep saying it wrong.
The Time Destructor.
No, but it switches itself off, because I guess the Terranium ran out. And
then the Doctor and Steven decide to go outside again.
And they're like, what?
I think at that point they just write off everything that just happened, like, well, that just happened. And then they get in the TARDIS and just kind of leave.
And that's where it ends.
So I was pretty sad when Brett died, because I really wanted him to be a companion. But, oh well.
Yeah, at the beginning of this serial, I thought Brett was going to be a new companion.
To replace Katarina that they killed off in episode 4.
Right.
But
he's not.
That wasn't to be. Oh well.
Yeah, I kind of would have liked that, because even though he was kind of a jerk at times, he butted heads with the Doctor more than any other companion has, which would have been interesting.
Right. He was like Ian, but more.
Right.
Except Ian didn't die.
And I've got to say, with how many deaths there were in this serial and how, I guess, dramatic they were, with people getting sucked out of airlocks and people shooting each other, I feel like for this serial they kind of went for a more serious approach than what they've been doing before.
Well, yeah, because a lot of... Every time, basically, the Doctor sees someone die by, like, Brett's hand, he's like, I don't advocate killing Brett. It's not okay.
Yeah, it's taken on a more serious tone than previous serials have, which I guess works. I mean,
yeah.
I liked what they were doing before too, where I feel like in most of the serials, they didn't go for either a comedic or serious approach. They just wrote it. They just wrote the serial.
Right.
Had set up a semi-dangerous setting for the Doctor and friends to get into. Had some comedic moments and some serious moments, and that worked out pretty well. But I feel like for this serial, they were specifically trying to make it more serious, which I was okay with. I mean, I like it so far.
I feel like at this point they knew they were probably going to write out the first Doctor at some point, and they wanted to give him some big, epic story.
Really? You thought that you think they knew they were going to write him out?
Well, just
in the
by
middle
the way
of season 3?
By the way the serial's been playing out, I feel like it's been designed to be the best of the first Doctor.
The first Doctor's biggest adventure or whatever.
Right.
That would make sense, but I don't know if they...
I mean, I don't know if they knew at that point, but it feels like it's been written to be the big adventure for the first Doctor. Like his greatest enemy with their greatest plan, against the greatest man in the galaxy.
Well, yeah, that does bring up a good point, but maybe they only did that because they didn't know if they were going to get renewed.
Possibly.
Because at this point, I think with each season, they didn't know if they were going to get renewed for another, so...
Right.
So maybe they didn't know about the regeneration, per se, but they also didn't know if they were going to get renewed for Season 4, so they were like, okay, let's just put all we have into Season 3. So, that last scene really begs the question, what were the Daleks actually going to use the Time Destructor for? I mean, once you turn it on, you can't turn it off. You can only use it on one planet. How are they going to conquer the universe with it?
How big is its effect area? Maybe they had a device that could, like, concentrate the Time Destructor into a beam, and they would just beam it at planets, like, Death Star-like.
But you can't turn it off.
Well, that's true.
They'd have to, like, maneuver the beam all around the universe.
Yeah, if there's one major plot hole in the Daleks' plan, it's they didn't put an off switch on the freaking Time Destructor.
I mean, were they just planning on waiting 50 more years to gather more terranium to conquer another planet? Was this a 1,000-year plan on their part? Like, what?
What seemed like such a good plan for the whole serial when you didn't know what the Time Destructor was turns out to be actually completely terrible. Honestly, the worst plan the Daleks have ever had.
Well, I don't know. There's one in the future of this series that is... I haven't seen it, but it's ridiculous in concept. And I think you know which one I'm talking about.
Is it in the classic or the reboot?
You know what I'm talking about. The one in the reboot where they... I don't want to say it.
Really confused. Tell me later.
Yes, I'll tell you later. But,
I mean, they had some pretty convoluted plans in the reboot. Not gonna lie.
The reboot just sounds convoluted, not gonna lie.
But it's amazing. So, Sarah retrospective? I mean, we did one for Katarina.
I guess, and I think Sarah was around for longer than Katarina, actually. Even though they both died shortly after they joined.
Well, let's see, Katarina had, 5 episodes? Because she died in episode 4, right?
Yeah.
She died in episode 5. Something like that. She was like one episode of the previous serial and 4 in this
10
one.
Minutes of the previous serial.
True. And then Sarah was here for at least 6. So yeah, Sarah was here longer than Katarina.
And I just want to say, Steven has witnessed the crappiest write-outs of other companions with the Doctor. Like, Vicky just left, and no one
and
cared.
Katarina and Sarah die.
If I was Steven, I'd just be like, Doctor, what is going on?
Well, I think he does do that. I was reading Sarah's page.
Yes, I know what he does.
Steven confronts the Doctor. I was like, oh, great, now I just spoiled something for myself.
Yes. Yeah, I know exactly what he does, actually, because I accidentally spoiled it, but I'm not going to say anything.
He just kills the Doctor, right? He's like, stop.
Yes, that's when the Doctor regenerates, of course, no.
That would be the worst way for the Doctor to go out, to have a companion turn on him and kill him. But yes, Sarah had a surprising amount of character development for 7 episodes. I actually think she joined episode 5 of the serial.
Yeah, I would have liked if she was a companion. She and Brett could have joined as companions, and that would have been a pretty good team. The Doctor, Steven, Sarah,
dynamic
Brett.
considering the brother and sister.
Yeah.
That could have been explored too. But no, they both died.
One by another's hands.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Realize if Sarah had just trusted the Doctor, she wouldn't be dead.
Right.
This could have happened to Ian. I mean, Ian, always was against the Doctor, but he still in the end trusted the Doctor. But that could have been Ian right there.
Right. I still think you can't blame any of the companions who are new to traveling with the Doctor for not trusting his plans because they're so outrageous.
Right.
But, I mean, in this case, she should have just taken Steven's word and trusted the Doctor.
And it ended up being a fatal error on her part.
Yep.
So there was a lot of cool aliens in this serial that we probably will never see again, but they're pretty cool.
Yeah. There was that one dude who was all white with the black spots, and...
There was Trantius. There was Giron, who he wrote down died, but didn't mention in our explanation where he died.
Oh yeah, Mavic Chen killed him when he was like, now I'm the ruler of this council.
Oh,
and
right.
everyone's like, no, and so he just kills Giron.
Right.
Was Giron the guy that looked like he had seaweed hanging off his face?
No, that was Trantius.
Oh yeah.
Trantis. I don't know. Galactic Council.
There was Zephon, who just wore a hood, who we never saw. I think he had webbed feet.
So we could talk about
there were the Vizians. They looked really cool. No,
they were invisible. So we could talk about the overarching storyline from this to the beginning of season 3. With what was the beginning of season 3? It was pretty bad series.
It was Galaxy 4.
It was Galaxy 4
/ Mission to the Unknown.
It was Galaxy 4 Mission to the Unknown. The Trojan one that I like to call the Trojans, but that's not its name. And
it was the Mythmakers.
Right, the Mythmakers. Such a convoluted name.
Yeah, actually that kind of ties into how the episode names are becoming less and less relevant to what actually goes on in the episodes.
Well, they were relevant before because they were names assigned later. Because, like, for season 1, they didn't give any episodes individual names. They were all just titled with the serial names. Yeah. So they could assign names to those episodes later that were relevant. Whereas for these, they, like, assigned them while they were filming them.
The Golden Death.
The Escape Switch. Volcano. Well,
Volcano made sense, but it was a really boring title.
The Christmas one was titled The Feast of Stephen, which was confusing.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to meet cannibals and they were going to eat Stephen, and that's how he was getting written out. That would have been a cool way to go out.
No, Stephen,
no. It would be terrible. It would be pretty terrible.
Stephen lives to see another day. But
in this serial.
Yes. But yeah, what were we saying?
Overarching storyline.
Right.
Episode titles. Things
so,
like that.
As far as the overarching storyline goes, or went, as I think we've mentioned this before, but I thought Mission to the Unknown and the Mythmakers should have been switched.
Maybe.
They could have been.
They could have
been.
But I feel like, considering this was going to be such a long serial, and they probably knew that, they probably aired Mission to the Unknown earlier to get more people hyped up, A, and B, so that it wasn't a 13-episode serial, and rather it was a 12-episode serial.
Possibly.
I mean, if they wanted to go that route, they could have put the Mythmakers in the middle, where the Feast of Stephen ended up, because the storyline just breaks there. But then they would have had to use Vicky in the beginning of the serial, and not in the second half.
They ended up just writing this. Well, season 3 has been ordered in just kind of a weird way so far, in my opinion.
A little bit.
And this serial, in particular, I thought started out really strong, had a really good first 6 episodes, and then just kind of fell flat after that.
Well,
I mean, it got better.
I liked the final 2
episodes. Got good at the end. It did definitely get good at the end, but that tension break with episodes 7 and 8. I mean, 7 obviously
it was
just
mainly 7's fault, because I feel like episode 8 was them trying to rebuild the tension that they'd lost in episode 7, and if they didn't have episode 7, then they wouldn't have had to rebuild the tension.
Right, but
and episode 8 could have been way better if they didn't have episode 7.
Right, I mean, they probably should have just gone on hiatus for Christmas if they thought people weren't going to watch it. But the reason I ended up liking the direction episode 8 went in, but I didn't like it while we were watching it, because I knew the monk was going to return in that episode.
Right.
But I didn't know he was going to follow them for the next couple of episodes, so I thought he was just going to be like a one-off thing on the volcano planet.
Right, you mentioned when we watched it, you're like, wow, it feels like they just shoehorned in the monk. But then he became a major plot point in the next 2 episodes.
So I was okay with it, but while watching episode 8, I was like, wow.
Well, I mean, sad thing is they never bring the monk back. I mean, with the Daleks, he could be pretty powerful. Sort of like Mavu Chen was with the Daleks. But if you can imagine the monk, and he has crazy, insane, I don't really care what happens to anybody plans.
Right, he's
that would be a formidable enemy for the Doctor. Which is sad
true.
That the monk's not coming back. He was pretty good.
Well, we might listen to the audio dramas, so
we might see him again. Well, we won't see him. We might hear him again, I guess.
well, a different actor portraying him.
A different actor portraying another regeneration of him, I guess, would be the correct... I don't know. This gets really confusing really quickly, doesn't it?
So, yeah, overall, I think there were 38 deaths in this serial. By far the most of any serial.
Well, I mean, I mentioned this, but it's 12 episodes.
That's true.
If I had to guess, it probably also has the most deaths per episode ratio. I mean,
yeah,
38
like
divided
10
by 12.
Egyptians.
38 divided by 12 is 3. About 3. About, on average, 3 people died per episode.
Right, and it seemed like they kind of just started killing people off willy-nilly in this serial, like Daxter, who just shows up and then gets shot by Brett. Brett, who just showed up a few episodes ago and gets shot by Sarah. Giron and Trantis, who just die unnecessarily.
Well, I feel like, for this serial at least, where it was the Daleks Master Plan, the deaths of everyone is what mainly added to the tension, because there was so much death going on, it really threw into doubt whether or not the Doctor was going to survive. Just considering how everyone in this serial seemed to have a complete disregard for any life.
I guess that's true, and you know, even though you usually would go into a serial thinking that the Doctor and his companions are going to make it out okay, not even his companions were safe this time.
Right.
As we saw when both Katerina and Sarah died.
I mean, and further, the deaths also develop a key point in the Doctor's character that survives through all his regenerations from this point on, is that he's absolutely against death. He will do anything to save anybody. The Eighth Doctor, apparently in the audio dramas, is like major pacifist. But I feel like that this serial was instrumental in developing that character aspect. Because, I mean, how can you like your hero if he just goes around killing people? I mean, then he's an anti-hero. And I guess some people would think that's cool, but...
Yeah, but I guess that all started when Brett was eager to kill off Katerina by opening the airlock, and the doctor was against it, and then that just evolved as one of his major character aspects.
Right.
Which endears you to the Doctor even more, I think, as you said. And you know, I'm gonna be pretty sad when the Doctor regenerates. You know, I've grown attached to the first Doctor.
Yeah, I've grown attached to the first Doctor.
And I remember at the end of season 1, we both kind of... Well, you said that Ian was definitely your favorite character, even including the Doctor. And I was kind of on the fence, but I was leaning towards Ian a lot. And, you know, at this point, I think the Doctor is my favorite character now. Just after what we've seen in season 2 and so far in season 3 of him.
Right.
He's just had some really crazy and awesome plans.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I like him so much is because in the reboot, like, all the Doctors are kind of young.
Yeah.
I've only seen young ones. But what makes the first Doctor so different is that he's old, and the Doctor in the reboot is older than this Doctor, but they look younger, and they make more rash decisions.
Uh-huh.
But this Doctor, he thinks, I don't know, he's really cool. He thinks things through, and he's older, which is a cool aspect, I think, to the Doctor. Yeah.
He still sometimes makes rash decisions, though.
Yeah, but it's for the greater good.
Yeah. Well, turning the time destructor on.
Sacrificing himself for the time destructor. Probably not the best plan.
But overall, I'd say this serial started out really good, kind of fell flat in the middle, and then ended pretty well, too.
Yeah, I mean, my summary would be basically the same. But it was important in developing a lot of, well, Steven's character as well as the Doctor's.
Yeah, and I know what happens to Steven, but
I don't.
This serial really does develop his character, as we'll see later on.
I guess we'll see that next week.
Yeah.
So, I guess one final thing we want to mention, since I don't think there's anything else we want to talk about. Episode 7, the Christmas episode, is completely unretrievable. It can never be retrieved. Because they thought, since it was a Christmas special and it wouldn't make sense if it wasn't aired on Christmas, they didn't sell it to any other countries. And then they destroyed it.
And now it's lost gone. To the ages.
Forever.
Which might be for the best. I mean...
Well, I don't think so. Considering it's an episode that is considered canon where the Doctor breaks the fourth wall, you realize this implies that for the entire series, forever, he knows he's being filmed. I mean, I guess you can disregard that one line. If there had to be one line in the entire show ever that I would disregard, it would be that one. But...
yeah.
Maybe it's for the better.
I mean, no, I kind of do want to see what's happening when we just have those still shots and like 12 people are talking at once and you have no idea what was going on. Maybe the video footage of that would have cleared things up a bit.
Yeah, well, I feel like there was a lot of physical humor in that episode because of the movie set going on at the police station. Side note, Peter Purves does a really good northern accent.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think
that's all we wanted to mention.
Yeah, I think that's all we wanted to mention. Email us. Again, no emails. Again.
Oh.
It's just become the norm at this point. We just say that every week.
So be the first in a really long time to email us.
Yeah. The doctor at decorativevegetable.com. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. Tell the monk. Tell Adrian Monk. And next week...
we have the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve.
Yep.
And until then, the end.